Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast. We are doing a live broadcast. Lots of similar words today, but Tyler, Arjun, and I are all here together in person. Very excited. Had a great time at practice. And then Alex is joining us from his apartment in Florida. Alex, we'll start with you, man. How you doing today?
Good. I had a lot of fun at camp. I heard Tyron Johnson was catching the balls, and I got to see it all in person. So it was all pretty great.
It was a great day of football. Had a great time listening to the Spanish broadcast team announcing some of the things. I forget their name. I think it's Adrian Marquez. I can't remember the other guy, but shout out to them. Arjun is here with us, continuing the theme of doing some recaps with him. Arjun, how you doing today, man?
Great. Had a lot of fun, and probably going to be one of my last training camp practices I'll be able to attend. But I had a great time with Tyler and Steven here.
Yeah, it was definitely a good time meeting Arjun in person. Tyler, this was your first time meeting Arjun as well. So how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. I can't say that I've been in hotels with two guys before. So this is a different experience. Definitely.
Yeah, shout out to the Holiday Inn. That's where I'm staying at. That's where we are recording from, our live studio, if you will. So fun time to talk about. I think the right place to start today is to talk about Tyrone Johnson. Mm-hmm. Are we in agreement?
Yes.
Yeah, sure. I don't have a choice.
Yeah, but he really has started to separate himself in terms of being the wide receiver 3. All other guys, Josh Palmer and Jalen Guyton are rotating in with the ones. But Tyron Johnson is really the one that is making an impact. He had a touchdown today. He had another crossing route catch. I believe they targeted him on a screenplay as well. Mm-hmm. So big day from Tyron Johnson again, which Arjun and I talked about yesterday. So Tyler, what has been your impression from how they have used him and how Tyron Johnson has looked?
I've loved how they used him so far. It seems like today he was catching balls at every level of the field and just continuing the theme of being the 50-yard plus bomb guy for Herbert. Just maybe it was like 45 yards today, but I can't believe how often they target him downfield. But they can also find him on the intermediate stuff as well. That just separates him from Guyton. My issue still is, though, that I feel like every time they trot out that first team offense, it is Guyton that goes out with Williams and Cook and Allen. So, while I do think Johnson has been the best receiver by far in camp, he still seems to kind of be like the 3B of the wide receiver threes, even though he's by far the best. Yeah. He's not out there as often as I would like to see him.
So you would say Guyton is 3A, or Johnson 3B, and then Palmer 4 or Palmer 3C?
Palmer 4, I think. Palmer does rotate more with the 2s, and then it's like mostly Guyton and then some Johnson. But yeah, I'm surprised Johnson hasn't taken that from Guyton just yet.
Yeah, I think that's obviously very important. Arjun, what have you kind of seen from Tyron Johnson and that group of players who are battling for the wide receiver 3 spot?
Yeah, so since I've gone Wednesday, Friday, and today, I thought he's been the one that's done the best. Even he's done better than guys like Keenan Allen, obviously Mike Williams. I was happy to see him back on the punt return team today. I think they allowed him back. I don't think many people reported about that, but if we're keeping 5 receivers and we're not keeping a KJ Hill or an Austin Pearl, then we need one of T. Billy and Jalen Guyton to be able to handle punt return duties. So keeping him, giving him reps is always helpful. And obviously he's done really well in the receiving game. And I'm hoping that upward trajectory, stays his path as we go into pads on Monday.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Alex, you're not there in person, but what has kind of been your takeaway from that wide receiver battle so far?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily expect Tyron Johnson to have this kind of camp where, he's just catching 50-yard balls left and right. Yeah. But to me, Tyron Johnson was always kind of the wide receiver 3 coming into here. We sort of had those, who's the wide receiver 3, Johnson, Guyton debates all offseason. And to me, what separated Johnson was his route running, his athleticism, and just the fact that he can flat out do more, right? Guyton can run some of those go routes, but that's kind of where his skill set ends, right? We talk about some of the other guys on the roster. Obviously, Josh Palmer is a rookie, who's going to be kind of developing as that outside receiver. Mike Williams is sort of the jump ball guy. I would say in terms of who's more well-rounded and does a little bit of everything, that is Tyron Johnson and kind of was Tyron Johnson before we're even at this point in training camp. So I'm not surprised that he's the wide receiver 3, or Guyton is still with the starters, but I don't think that'll be for long. I think Guyton has Johnson has proven himself really above and beyond, and we'll see what happens in the preseason. But everything is kind of as I've expected to this point. As far as like KJ Hill dropping balls and Joe Reed, kind of having some up and down moments, it's really just all that I've expected. All of the other wide receivers are sort of, again, good at kind of one or two things, but they're not as efficient as Tyron Johnson, who clearly has the outright lead for wide receiver 3.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned, his kind of well-rounded skill set, because I mean, last year it was really like only deep balls that we saw. Mm-hmm. And, we're seeing a much more well-rounded player in camp, catching screen passes, doing the mesh concepts that Tyler was talking about from the Packers today. And Josh Palmer had a couple targets in the mesh as well. But Tyron Johnson he gives them a different kind of weapon than Palmer and Jalen Guyton can. We're seeing Jalen Guyton run some, deep crossers and some deep outs and deep balls, but we haven't really seen him do anything in the short or intermediate range. It's all stuff past 15 yards. So I feel like the usage of Tyron Johnson is kind of showing us, that he is going to be that wide receiver 3. But that doesn't mean that Palmer and Guyton won't be involved. I think all 5 receivers will have targets and all 5 will play a lot. Mm-hmm. It's just that Tyron Johnson right now, like I said, and like Alex has said, is just so much more well-rounded than the other 2 guys.
As far as I remember, there might have been one target for Jalen Guyton today. It was a sideline catch or sideline pass that didn't end up being a completion. So it's just kind of inefficient, whereas Johnson gives you everything, and you can do so much more with it.
Yeah, and Palmer had a couple targets, too, from Easton Stick and Chase Daniel. In particular, there was one play where Josh Palmer kind of ran like a deep crosser, and Daniel really floated in a nice ball there.
It was.
I don't know about you guys, but it seems pretty obvious that Chase Daniel is going to be the quarterback 2. Yeah. Which is not really a surprise. It just seems like Easton Stick still has a lot of learning to do. He doesn't really process the reads very quickly, whereas Chase Daniel, he's obviously a little bit more limited as an athlete, as an arm, but he's able to kind of read and go through and anticipate much more efficiently than Easton Stick. I don't know what Arjun, if you've kind of seen the same thing there.
No, I totally agree. There was a play where Austin Prohl and I think it was KJ Hill were running crossers over the middle.
Yep.
Prohl had about 4 or 5 yards on his defender. I think it was Tavon Campbell. And Stick let the play run for so long to the point where he threw it. First of all, he threw it to the wrong guy. He threw it to KJ Hill, who only had like a yard of separation. So he got tackled immediately. Prohl probably would have had a touchdown from what I saw.
Yeah.
So I agree with what you're saying. And obviously I think I knew Daniel should be the QB2 just because of what, he brings to the table, knowing the offense. And like, from my understanding, he's a pretty good film watcher.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good to see that he still has I think he has a pretty good passing touch when it comes to like floating balls in the right position. And he's had a couple of good connections so far in camp.
Oh, I was just going to say, it looks like on the far side of the field, they were working on, bootlegs, rollouts, and being very athletic during, some of the breaks that they had. And while you do kind of lose some of that with Chase Daniel, I'd still rather take a guy who can actually perform and move the entire offense, not just himself.
Yeah, Alex, what do you think in terms of like what has to happen for Stick to potentially be on the bubble a little bit more than he seems to be? Because it seems like most of the beat writers kind of expect that Stick is kind of viewed as like a lock to make the roster. Do you like what has to happen for Stick to, be in danger of being cut, I guess, is my question.
I don't understand how the beat writers view him as a lock to make the roster, because there's the Brandon Staley quote back from a few months ago where he did say they basically view the Stick Daniel competition as a 1v1. And so, right, you have Justin Herbert. There's no question marks about the future now. So to me, what's the point of having Stick on the roster other than maybe being able to flip him for like a 6th round, 7th round pick? Like, I feel like that's kind of the best case to the Colts. I feel like that's kind of the best case scenario at this point. And I know there's a lot of Stick fans. I'm not going to get into that. Like, yeah, if you like the guy, you like the guy, but he just has some confusing throws. The one on the white pick 6 was just like kind of baffling. And I had to do a 5-minute Twitter investigation to figure out who he was throwing to. And it was Jason Moore. But he had a throw like that in the 2019 Saints game. I remember in the preseason, just kind of very up and down. And I don't know, like, to me, the format with Herbert just doesn't lend itself to Stick making this roster. And so, back when obviously they drafted him with Phillip Rivers as the starter, and that kind of up in the air in the future, then they kept him when Tyron was the starter, coming into the season. I just don't see why, he really is on the roster anymore. And it doesn't seem like he's really improved in the last 2 years. Obviously, this is only day 4 of camp, and I'll have a whole, 3 games of the preseason to really show what he has. But to me, I'm seeing the same player that I saw 2 years ago, at least in some of these clips. And based on the reporting, where it's just like, hey, there's a nice 20-yard sideline pass, and then there's who was that ball even for? So that's just kind of the thing. And I know a lot of people want to use him as like some kind of gadget player like Taysom Hill, but he's not Taysom Hill. Like we've gone over that ad nauseum in the offseason. So I get where the beat writers are coming from, and they certainly have better intel than I would have. But I just don't see how Brandon Staley says it's a one-on-one competition and Stick is failing in the competition, and he still makes the roster. Brandon Staley could be lying, but I don't have any reason to believe that he would be. So to me, keeping Stick on the roster just kind of seems like a Anthony Lynn era non-Justin Herbert starter kind of move. And so I just don't see the point anymore.
I don't either, although initially I didn't have him making the roster because I'd rather have a defensive back or maybe a linebacker like Arjun, but he can make the roster. But today and some of the days and throughout the practices overall, the defensive line has looked really good. And today, Fehoko stood out, Broughton stood out, and those guys we weren't quite sure were going to make the roster, but they're certainly making more of a case. And I'd rather have someone like that on the roster than a QB3.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned Fehoko and Broughton. Broughton had a tip ball. Yeah, I think he made some plays in the run game. Fehoko had 2 sacks. Yeah. So Fehoko has looked pretty good from what we saw yesterday and today. Yeah. So that defensive tackle group, like, it's going to be really interesting to see how it sorts out. I think all of us kind of agree that, Christian Covington is kind of that 4th guy. Mm-hmm. But if they want to keep a 5th and maybe even a 6th, there's got to be some people who kind of stand out. And, we can talk about Jared Goldwire, who kind of fits that Jerry Tillery kind of archetype. But right now it's been Braden Fehoko and Cortez Broughton.
Yeah, I'll add to that. Like, I think so. From what I've seen, the Chargers are using a lot of like 3 defensive tackle formations. Like, it's not like your standard 2 D tackles, 2 edge, and then your linebackers. It's a lot of 3 D tackles. So I don't think keeping 4 is smart. I think Fehoko backs up Linval as like the 0 tech right over the center. He's gonna occupy two blockers. Mm-hmm. But then Covington backs up one of Jones or Tillery, and then the other one you probably just keep Cortez, and that's what, 5, right?
That's 5 right there.
Yeah, and that's enough. I don't think 6 is necessary, especially with how much nickel they're going to be running. And like when you get to obvious passing downs, I think you only go 2D tackles than 2 edge players. But I think 5's enough, and that's where the numbers should be going to 2021.
Can I be very controversial if we want to move off for a second?
Go for it.
I think Justin Herbert's been pretty 50-50. And I think the stuff that he does deep and the highlights that you see on Twitter, I think have been excellent. Yeah. But then there are also today some very, very routine throws that he has missed. And I think Steven mentioned there's just something off, not necessarily about him, but some of the offense. And I think between him and Williams, there were 7 targets, only 3 were receptions. And it wasn't necessarily all like Mike Williams' fault. And I'm not saying that Herbert's bad or anything. And look, he's learning a new offense. He has the hardest job. And technically, the offensive line can't do anything right now because they don't have pads. So it's very, very hard for him. But some of the routine throws, I think, are kind of reminiscent of that week 2 Kansas City game or that Panthers game where it's like, you should be hitting that out, So no panic. Obviously, the guy, once he's in the game, is a whole different guy. And that's fine. Like, I'd rather you win the games and look bad at practice, whatever. But just something to note right now, because I think people are hyping up what he looks like in those Tyron Johnson throws, but you're missing some of the intermediate stuff that doesn't make the social media.
Well, I think, we've kind of seen, every time that he throws a deep ball, he's, probably getting sacked in real life, which again,
that too.
It's so hard for the offensive line to really succeed without pads. Like, I'm going to keep saying that. Everybody keeps asking, how's the offensive line look? It's so hard to block without pads.
Yeah.
And, they're asked to go full speed, and you have nothing to grab onto Joey Bosa or Linval Joseph or even Braden Fajoko. So in terms of it being off, I think specifically something is off with Herbert and Williams.
Yeah.
Like today, there was a specific route combination where Williams was – it seemed like Herbert was expecting Mike Williams to run a post.
Yep.
And Mike Williams kind of was running a corner. And
slot fade.
Yeah, or like a slot fade kind of thing. And so just like the communication between those two seems off. And, Tyler wrote an article for our blog site specifically about Mike Williams. It just doesn't seem like he is fully engaged. And today there were a couple miscommunications between him and Herbert from what I saw. And Arjun kind of pointed out one as well.
Yeah, the Mike Williams and Herbert nearly made me print a retraction on my article early on because I think as soon as they hit the 7v7s, it was like 4 Mike Williams targets, but they were kind of off. Actually, no, he hit kind of early. He dropped one, but it was just really odd. And then drills aren't everything, and we know that Josh Palmer is trying to fight for a spot, whereas Williams is kind of has his reserved a bit. Yeah. But the difference between Palmer and Williams, there was one play they both took like slants, I believe, from 2 different quarterbacks, just on a drill. And Palmer catches the ball and runs 15 yards upfield like you're supposed to. Anytime you play football, high school or whatever,
gotta finish.
You got to finish. You try to finish. And Williams just kind of grabbed it and stopped. And granted, some other plays, he didn't do that, but it was just kind of telling to watch those two next to each other. One guy is fighting and clawing, and every drill is important to him. And the other guy is just kind of, And then you watch him in 7v7s and 11-on-11s, and he's 3 for 7 on receptions. So I don't know what's going on, but I'm certainly disappointed so far.
Yeah, so in terms of the Mike Williams thing, you guys were talking about sort of, how his route running was the first couple days of camp. That didn't surprise me. I didn't, expect in one offseason Mike Williams would certainly become Michael Thomas, like the coaching staff kind of put out there. As far as the connection between him and Justin Herbert, I've always felt that that's been a little off, particularly because Mike Williams was obviously working a lot with Tyrod Taylor last offseason. Justin Herbert was, presumably working with a lot of Tyron Johnsons and Jalen Guyton's, and that's where, his connections with those guys kind of came from last year. And he was always kind of on the money with Keenan, obviously pretty early on, just because that's who Keenan is. But Mike Williams was just always sort of in this weird middle with him. And, I don't want to overreact 4 days into camp, but it's a lot of, it sounds like a lot of the same stuff we've been saying, particularly for the last year in the Mike Williams, Justin Herbert era. And, as far as his route running is concerned, I just don't have a lot of confidence for him to get that much better. And it's very weird because he is working with, one of the best route runners in the league on the other side. So that part of it is weird. But to me, the expectations for Mike Williams have never been that high. And I frankly think Herbert just kind of works better with other guys at this point. But again, it's only day 4 of training camp, and I'm not, certainly taking out the possibility that Mike Williams has a career year, but there are some red flags, I think, kind of early.
Yeah, I still think he can have a career year, right? If he stays healthy, he'll produce. Yeah. But I don't know. I just am expecting more out of Mike Williams, and we're heading into year 5. And like Alex said, I just don't feel like he's improved very much. And granted, as Kareem C, he probably is gone after this season unless he really has a great season. But it's just tough for me to look at Josh Palmer and the different roles that he is filling, Tyron Johnson and all the different roles that he is filling, and then Mike Williams is still the jump ball guy. I mean, he did a mesh route today where they try to get him the ball after the catch, but it's just, I don't know, man. It's been frustrating to watch just kind of his, I don't want to say, I never want to call player lazy, but I'm not seeing the urgency from Mike Williams that I wish I were.
It sounds like
I feel like I'm shitting on Mike Williams too much these days. So.
Well, I think his skill set is still very good, and like Steven said, he can still have a career year. I just, in terms of my expectations have never been that this guy is going to become, a 20 million per year worth kind of wide receiver, right? In the style of, a Michael Thomas or Mike Evans. I get what people see in him, and I certainly think he has that potential, but like there's just such a long road to becoming that, I guess. But, it's just not going to be overnight 1 year.
Yeah. I'll point out this. I think a lot of fans, Chargers fans and NFL fans, they'll hype up Williams because he's a first round pick. So you have that draft pick bias, and it's something that you see over and over. Like he's gonna get more money than I think Juju did this past offseason with worse production because he was a first round pick. He was a 7th overall pick in the 2017 draft. So he's obviously gonna have higher expectations than a 2nd or 3rd round pick who's gone through a similar career path. But yeah, it's not. Williams hasn't looked the greatest. I still think there's a lot of time, and obviously, I don't think they've even shown a quarter of their playbook yet. So I'll end the offensive discussion with this. I think it looked pretty solid today. That they had its moment. They had their moments. Yeah. Offensive line didn't look too great in the run game, but again, the pads thing. The funniest part for me was there's a formation. They were, I think, an I formation. They ran like a play action, and I don't know what the protection call was, but they had Gabe Neighbors blocking Joey Bosa.
Jeez.
And so, all Bosa did was like a sidestep, swipe, and sack. So I thought that was pretty funny. But the defense looks legit. Like, and there's lot of players who've looked legit. Like Kaiser our standout for this weekend and this whole week. Like Kaiser's been awesome. He's been where the ball's been. There was a play McKitty dropped the pass, but even if he caught it, Kaiser would have in a real game just laid him out.
Right.
I think the most interesting thing to me, I talked about it yesterday, was the 3 safety looks. Like there have been a couple plays where against the ones, Staley's calling a formation with Gilman and Adderley back and Derwin in the slot. And they're running a lot of dime packages out of that because then they have Chris Harris as the nickel back face on and Davis on the outside. But yeah, I think Kevin brought up a good point. I think Mark Webb could fit into that role better than Gilman, in my opinion.
I agree.
But yeah, the 3 safety look is a college concept that's slowly coming to the NFL. Carolina did it last year since Matt Rule brought it from Baylor, and I think hiring guys like Cody Seidha and Derek Ansley who worked in the college ranks, you're going to see a lot of these college concepts become part of the Chargers.
I think it's just very interesting from, what you guys are saying about the safeties that, Brandon Staley has all that confidence from kind of the get-go here to just put so much on Mark Webb's plate or, Gilman's plate, just in terms of the safety room, partially because he has to. But putting Derwin in the slot and then putting those two too deep is certainly not the kind of conventional thing that I was maybe thinking about in terms of how the safety room would work.
Yeah, yesterday when Arjun and I were there was a particular play when they went into the double safety look, but Derwin and Nasir Adderley were the 2 slot defenders, and then Chris Harris and Alohi Gilman were deep, which I thought was very, very interesting in terms of usage. And the other thing I noticed today that I was excited to look forward to, they didn't look Derwin's way, man. Like Derwin goes into the slot against Keenan Allen or Josh Palmer, and they did not look his way. So I'm really excited about Derwin, the cover guy. The broadcast guys that were talking pointed out that Derwin was right there step for step with Keenan the entire time that he was guarding him. So that's going to be a lot of fun, specifically in the AFC West where, the Chargers are going to have to go up against Travis Kelce and Darren Waller and even Noah Fant, twice a year. So Derwin's been awesome as a cover guy. I haven't seen him make a ton of plays on the ball, but the Chargers first team offense is definitely avoiding Derwin James.
A couple of people are asking about Asante Samuel Jr. Did one of you say that he mostly played the slot?
Yeah, I'll answer this. So first question about the first team reps. I didn't really see him play at all. He's pretty much like only running with the 2s. Faison's kind of, I'm not going to say he's established the CB2 role, but he's the guy that's getting the majority, if not all, of the CB2 snaps when they go nickel. So Asante's not there yet. I haven't really seen him do anything, if I'm being honest. They haven't really targeted him.
Right. Yeah. One today, I think.
Yeah. So it's not like he's being targeted a lot, that he's getting a chance to make plays. He didn't look too bad, and I kind of was just watching him every single time he was in. They didn't use him outside, I think, at all.
It's all slot stuff right now.
It was all slot stuff, and it's not a bad thing. Like, I'll put it this way: like, slot quarterbacks are extremely important with how much nickel the NFL is transitioning into. Like, a Desmond King was so valuable in 2018. A guy like Chris Harris has been so valuable for that Broncos defense since like from 2015 to like in their heyday, right? You need good slot cornerbacks, and if that's what he turns out to be, that's fine. And anyway, you're going to pay him less money than you're doing an outside corner, which is fine.
That's true.
Especially since he's going to be playing 70-80% of the snaps. Like Troy Hill, the only reason he to get more money is because he's older. He's like 30 now. So
is he that old?
Yeah, he's 29-30.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I'll put it this way: Asante hasn't gotten many reps with the first team. He hasn't looked like anything because he's not getting targeted a lot. But the main thing to take away is he's pretty much only being used in the slot. And he's playing with guys like Tavon Campbell and Ryan Smith on the outside, or even like John Brannon, right? Like, he's not playing with legit dudes who are like not lockdown, but like legitimate outside corners. Tavon Campbell played in the slot every single game that Chris Harris missed and after Desmond King got traded. So technically he's not any type of corner, but they look like they like him more inside, which doesn't really matter to me. I think it's more of, I've always said it's more of a matchup based thing.
Exactly.
I still think he can play outside, right?
Yeah.
But as Kevin points out right here in the chat, like, the difference in size between Brandon Faison and Asante Samuel Jr. is very noticeable. And right, like, size isn't everything. I still think he can play outside. But, if all the Chargers get out of Asante Samuel Jr. is an above average slot defender, like, that's great. I think people need to get to the point where not every draft pick is expected to be an all-pro kind of player. Like, Asante Samuel Jr. can still bring a ton of value to this team and this franchise if all he is a very good slot defender. So obviously I personally think that he can be much more than that. But, right now, Brandon said they're kind of cross-training him inside and outside. We haven't really seen much outside. At least I haven't seen much outside. It's been all on the slot, which, that's kind of where the NFL is heading, like Arjun pointed out.
So I know Chris Harris talked about him and Asante Samuel Jr. going slot, outside safety, whatever they needed. Harris has definitely done that, but Samuel hasn't done a lot of safety work either, right? Interesting.
Yeah.
I'd just like to point out that me and Tyler both smirked in immaturity when Steven said sizes and everything.
Exactly.
So,
same wavelength, Alex.
Oh my gosh. You're going to do this again, man?
Yeah. No, but the Asante thing, I don't think is too much of a concern with him playing outside or him not playing outside to this point. I think you just kind of work him in the slot and then maybe see down the road, obviously, maybe during the preseason or, later on in training camp, if he can kind of take those outside reps away from Faison at some point. But I don't think it's necessary. And also, like, this team may very well need like a slot corner next year, right? This is Chris Harris's last season on his contract. And theoretically, the thing that you want to do is replace Chris Harris with Asante Samuel Jr., right? From a contractual standpoint, you have that rookie control. Not saying that Chris Harris will definitely be gone next year. I could definitely see him, playing his way into some kind of extension. But from a financial standpoint, at least that's kind of what you would want to do. So I don't think that it's really anything to worry about that Asante is not playing outside right now, even though we sort of thought in the traditional sense that was what he might have been drafted to do. So I just think it's kind of going to take its course. And if he starts the season out at slot, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing that we wanted to point out from practice today that was pretty interesting in terms of the starters, Arjun mentioned Kaiser White already, but I don't think I saw Drew Tranquil very often with the ones. It was pretty much all Kaiser White and Kenneth Murray.
Even in base.
Yeah, there were a couple times in the red zone where it was Tranquil and Kaiser together. But Kaiser has been, the most frequent linebacker with the ones, which has been very interesting. And then Arjun pointed out today, too, that Kyler Fackrell and Uchenna Nwosu are rotating quite a bit. Like, obviously, there's no pads, which is significant for linemen, but I was pretty surprised at how often Kyler Fackrell was out there instead of Uchenna Nwosu today.
How often are you seeing like a Fackrell and Nwosu and both on the field at the same time? None?
I think Fackrell backs up, or Fackrell and Nwosu are playing the same role. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's like a Leo big end type of situation, like it was with Bradley, right? Because like you had your defined roles. But with Staley, I'm not sure if like edge 1 or edge 2, whatever side is, like if it matters as much. But because I don't see Rumph as being Bosa's backup. They're not built at all similarly, right? But yeah, no, I think Fackrell played pretty well today. I didn't really see Chenna on the field too much, if I'm being honest, during team drills. I don't know if he just sat it out or if I just missed him. But yeah, Fackrell's looking pretty solid.
Yeah, Fackrell's 52.
Oh, Fackrell's 52. Okay.
They're like they will be on the field together, Fackrell and Nwosu, that is, because like Bosa can't play every single snap. So they'll share the field eventually together more often than we think.
Yeah.
But it is kind of interesting because in terms of like frame and skill sets, like Nwosu, Fackrell, and Rumph are all pretty similar. Yeah. Obviously, no one is really Joey Bosa. Like he's one of one.
Right.
But in terms of like who's going to be his backup, I just kind of think that it's going to be Fackrell, and then Rumph will kind of rotate in whenever. Rumph had a solid play today as well. A couple people asked me about him yesterday. He had a good play against the run, and I think he had a sack on Easton Stick, if I'm not mistaken. So Rumph had a solid day too.
Yeah. Would you, just as a question, would you still say the defense beat the offense today, much like you said on Friday?
Yeah.
If you counted sacks, yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. The red zone in particular, it's the first team offense. Like they had a touchdown, I think, but I want to say they had like 8 plays, and the run game is basically non-existent right now. And then I think Kaiser had a pass breakup. I think Chris Harris had a pass breakup, and so the offense kind of stalled in the red zone packages today. The second team offense with Chase Daniel was a little bit better against the second team defense, but the first team defense right now is definitely getting the best of the first team offense, which again, it's going to be to be expected at this point in training camp. In all of football, the defense is kind of always the hot start, and then the offense kind of has to find its rhythm. But the defense had another good day today for sure.
I want to circle back to one more thing. So did you say Drew Tranquil is playing special teams today?
Yeah, Drew Tranquil is getting a ton of work on special teams this week from what I've seen.
Which is good, yes.
Very good.
That's a big help there.
So I think that, if he is kind of like the third odd man out, so to speak, then he'll play special teams. Kaiser is doing some special teams work as well. But all of like the first team special teams units, whenever they do kickoff or punt stuff or all these drills, Tranquil is always like one of the first guys up. So him and Neighbors are almost like always right next to each other, I noticed today. But I mean, Tranquil, if he's a special teams ace, which we thought that he could be, that's great for the Chargers, who desperately need special teams help.
And I was just going to ask, because they did sign Ryan Smith. Did you see him a lot out there today? I know he was coming back from the back thing. I think he did come back.
Didn't Popper say he was out again today?
He was back.
He was back in
the individual drills. I think I saw him second team, like defense, like on the outside. It was him, Campbell, or Faison, and then Asante in the slot, I think.
Yeah, I can't remember, honestly. I did notice Tavon Campbell on the outside and Asante in the slot.
Yeah, but he's definitely a gunner, though. Like, he has to be. He didn't sign him.
Yeah.
He signed him to play special teams, and then defense is a bonus, right?
Yeah, if he's playing corner, we have a problem.
What does no Oxford comma mean?
I think it's Arjun Steven comma.
Oh, because I forgot the second comma. Okay.
Tisk.
Yeah, my bad. All right, let's do some, unless either of you guys have some other takeaways you want to mention from today.
No kicker work. I don't think the kickers even kicked more than one ball today. It's ridiculous.
I don't know, like,
why?
I don't understand, like, what's going on there, because, like, they're doing kickoff and stuff like that, but they haven't done any field goal work. I saw Vizcaino kind of, like, taking some warm-up kicks on the far end when the team was doing 11-on-11 stuff. But there's nothing to report for kicking battles as much as we would love to.
Yeah.
All right, let's do some stock up, stock down from the first week of training camp. Again, obviously, it's only been 4 practices. I'm going to rule out Tyron Johnson as the stock up option because I think that would be pretty obvious.
Yeah.
But let's start with some other stock ups. And Tyler, let's start with you. Who's one player that has really impressed you that's kind of done a lot for potentially earning a bigger role or earning a roster spot?
Oh, okay. Because I was gonna go with an established starter for that. Okay, so stock up.
You can do
for-
the starter if you want to.
Okay, so I immediately thought of Jared Cook, and I knew that obviously he's going to get targeted. And considering your offensive coordinator knows exactly how to use you because he's so familiar with you, it's kind of expected. But I mean, he is like the number one target for Justin Herbert right now, and it's been intermediate. It's been that 55-yard touchdown the other day or whatever it was. So, yeah, so far stock up for him for sure.
Yeah, Cook has looked really, really crisp, and it's honestly pretty impressive how well he moves for being, in his 13th season. Arjun, I know you just said Jared Cook was your first choice, but do you have another stock up option for us?
Yeah, I think Kaiser White's just the obvious answer, and we've gone over him a lot. He's just been playing like an explosive version of himself from 2018, and Staley's been using him all over the field. Like he's guarding tight ends, running backs in the flats. And honestly, that's another thing. Like I haven't seen any linebackers having to cover receivers on like crossing routes. It's a lot
all
of
flats.
And like I should have mentioned this like 5 minutes ago, but I noticed like whenever a receiver like a Jalen Guyton, if it's a slot receiver, goes in motion, the slot cornerback is following them across. Like it's if it's a tight end, I don't think there's been much motion. Like Gabe Neighbors, I don't think really attracts much attention. But when it's a slot receiver, the slot cornerback is following them. And most of the time I think it is man. But even if it's zone, they're putting a slot cornerback in front of that slot receiver. They're not putting the hands of the defense with Murray and Kaiser and Tranquil. Even though they're somewhat athletic, you would rather have a slot cornerback within that slot receiver range. So yeah, sorry, that was a little bit off topic.
Very good.
No, that's good to talk about.
Yeah,
Kaiser definitely stock up, and I think he could be working himself into a starting role, which I wouldn't mind at all.
Yeah, Alex, do you have a stock up option here that you want to mention from the videos and tweets and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to assume if you're talking about the last 3 days, no one's had a maybe bigger stock up than Justin Jackson a little bit coming back from COVID, and us being like, oh, maybe he's a cut candidate, maybe he's going to miss 10 days, to us now being like, nope, he's pretty much firm running back number 2. And I remember Tyler saying he looked pretty explosive today. So, I think it has to be him. And as crazy as it says to sound, because, his stock can't really go higher, Derwin James. I mean, we talked about kind of the green dot stuff and all that with Staley. Like that is a huge change from the defense just going forward. I do think last year, while I know what Bradley was kind of trying to do with green dot Kenneth Murray, I just don't think it ever fully worked. I think that, it just sort of, there was a little bit too much on his plate last year, I think, coming into his rookie year. So I think having Derwin back and just giving him the green dot. We also talked about, what if they sign John Johnson, right? Can John Johnson be that Staley communicator guy? And I remember saying this at the time, but it just sort of felt like Derwin James is Staley's John Johnson, right? But more dynamic of an athlete, obviously. So I think that's, a really big stock up, and just hoping he stays healthy, of course.
Yeah, that's a great call. And Daniel Popper pointed out that it looks like Cole Christiansen as well as Eamon Ogbongbemiga have gotten some practice in that role as well. Drew Tranquil too, although, if he's in on the first team, it is Derwin calling the plays. So that's another nice thing, is that Brandon Staley is kind of preparing multiple people to call plays. So if Derwin James does go down, they'll have a chance to make some ground up there. So my stock up is going to be Kyler Fackrell, who, again, mentioning him, none of us were really expecting like a big role out of him. It kind of seemed like they were all in on Uchenna and Nwosu playing the majority of snaps, but it genuinely seems like Kyler Fackrell is going to be playing about 40-50% of the snaps, and rotating in between Bosa and Nwosu. And he's looked pretty good. He had a would-be sack today. I think he had another sack on Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. I think he had the first one. So Kyler Fackrell has been pretty impressive so far. Let's get to some stock downs, and I'll start this one off. I think the player who really has, received the most stock down right now is Joe Reed, unfortunately, because, we all kind of assumed that he was going to be this kind of great kick returner at least, right, and potentially be a gadget guy on offense. He's not even working with the kick returners anymore. It's been KJ Hill has rotated back there, Jalen Guyton, Tyron Johnson, Austin Prohl. So Joe Reed is getting 0 return reps. And so I just don't know how he's going to make this roster if he doesn't have that role, which is really unfortunate because we all were pretty, relatively excited about him. And then Anthony Lynn compared him to Percy Harvin, which, my gosh, was so dumb. But yeah, I don't know, man. Like, he's looked okay in practice as a receiver. I think he does look a little bit more crisp with his routes. But he had a drop today, unfortunately.
Yeah, he did.
And again, if he's not adding that special teams value, I don't see how he makes this roster.
Our expectations for him and what we think he can do versus what he has been or how they've been using him, either last year or this year, it's been so different than what we saw from him in college. And like you said, why is he not even at kick return? That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah.
And then they try to use him as a receiver, which is understandable, but they don't do any like Joe Reed kind of receivers, no Deebo Samuel looking things. Now, again, they're still installing the playbook, so maybe there's things, and that's not necessarily like a staple of your offense is a reverse or end around, but like they're not even using him like that either. So I don't even know what his role is. The way they use him, he's basically just a more useless Jason Moore at this point.
Yeah.
Damn.
Dang, dude.
Sorry.
Jason Moore has actually been pretty good.
Moore has been very useful,
Yeah.
and so he's been less useful.
There you go. Moore's kind of like that number 1 target for the backup quarterbacks, it seems. But again, I don't know how he makes this roster. He's probably a practice squad guy again. But, to Tyler's point, I don't think I've seen any end arounds. Like, I've seen them motion and like fake it, but I haven't seen them do like any end around.
They did have some motion today, but nothing out of it.
All right, Arjun, who is your stock down player for this week so far?
Okay, dude, can I?
I can go.
Yeah,
We'll go back.
We'll
go back.
He's too scared.
Right.
You're good.
So stock down for me, not because of anything bad necessarily. It has to be Drew Tranquil because I thought he was going to be the linebacker that was on the field the most. Looks like it could be Murray, and not only that, but White is not taking the reps that Drew Tranquil would be taking. And there's nothing wrong with playing some special teams, but if Tranquil might be that guy on special teams, then he's not going to have as big a role defense as I thought. So, nothing bad. He didn't do anything wrong. It's just I thought he was going to be like the play caller, the guy who plays the most, the number 1 linebacker. He might be linebacker 3 at this point.
All right, I need Alex to go.
All right, Alex. No worries. Go ahead, Alex.
I'll go with it's too easy an answer, but Easton Stick. We've just been talking about him as like in this quarterback competition. He is kind of the younger, like, hey, maybe they view him as an asset of some kind. And I just don't think he is that thing through about a week of training camp so far. And I don't think he'll ever become that kind of thing where maybe they could flip him or maybe he becomes permanent QB2. And Daniel, just based off of what I've seen, some of the throws, Daniel just looks a lot better. And that's because Chase Daniel has always been better than Easton Stick, and they needed to sign him when they did.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is really unfortunate. He's probably the one player that was most impacted by COVID and the cutting of the preseason.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But he's going to have to show a lot in the preseason games for me to feel comfortable about him making the roster. All right, Arjun, are you ready?
Yeah,
okay, here we go.
So that might be a surprise one, but I'm actually going to go with Trey McKitty. I think all the tight ends who should make the roster have had a better camp. Cooks obviously had one of the best camps of anyone.
Yeah.
Parham has looked all like a weapon, like the weapon he's supposed to be in the red zone when he gets targeted. And Anderson had a really nice catch today on a back shoulder fade from Daniel.
Yeah, that was Daniel. It was the last play at the practice too.
It was a really nice back shoulder fade. Held it, and he was like falling to the ground pretty hard. And McKitty, there was one play I specifically watched, who was lined up, I think, like as a wide tight end, and Derwin James was like locked onto him. Derwin literally just put one hand out, or I'll use this hand. He like pressed him a little bit, and you just didn't get off anything. Like he wasn't able to run a route. It felt like he just got like shoved off his route. He hasn't really looked like physically like the part. I haven't really got to.
Yeah.
But I don't think he caught like one reception for like 6 or 7 yards today, but it was just like a flat route. So
I think that was his first catch of the camp too.
Yeah, it probably was. So, he hasn't really looked like the part receiving wise. I think the blocking thing has a lot left to be desired. He's obviously going to be doing work on special teams.
Yeah.
But right now, I think all three tight ends who are going to make the roster have had a better camp than him.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one to point out, right? Is that it kind of seems like all four, the four being Cook, Parham, Steven Anderson, and McKitty, all seem like they have legitimate arguments to make the roster. Steven Anderson and Justin Jackson probably had the catches of the day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Justin Jackson had one where he was kind of falling to the ground, dove a little bit, and kind of snow coned it, like right as it was about to hit the ground, which was really impressive. But Anderson has a role. Tyler pointed out, Anderson took a couple reps at fullback today too. So he mentioned to us, Alex and I, in our interview, that he's kind of working on his blocking, and if he is able to be used as like an H-back, fullback, tight end hybrid, then that's obviously something that can kind of be a way for him to separate himself from the other guys. So in terms of,
sorry,
go ahead. No, you're good.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to defend my boy Tyler, like from this guy
Gil Scott says Tranquil has the green dot in the linebacker, whatever that means. Dumb take.
Yeah,
Arjun.
Yeah. So Derwin's calling the plays. If you listen to the Staley mic'd up yesterday, go check it out on the Chargers YouTube website.
It's great.
Staley's talking to Derwin every play. Tranquil, I don't even think Tranquil said a word in the when he was talking through the walkie-talkie. It's all Derwin.
It's all Derwin.
Mm-hmm. And just because we saw pictures of minicamp where Tranquil's calling the plays, he hasn't even been on the field for less than 20% of the snaps. Kazier's played more than him. Kenneth has played more than him. Just because he had the green dot for a week or something in minicamp doesn't mean it's going to translate. Derwin's playing 100% of the snaps. Tranquil's not. And even if Tranquil was the starter, he's not going to be there in dime packages because that's going to be Kenneth Murray. So why would you want to give the green dot to someone who doesn't play the majority of the snaps, if not all the snaps, right? Yeah. So, I don't know how that's a dumb take when, I don't know if you were at practice, but we clearly saw with our own eyes that Kazier is playing more than Tranquil. And we even heard it yesterday in the mic'd up that Derwin's calling the shots every play. Derwin, make sure you're talking to them. Make sure you're playing our defense, right?
Yeah.
So, I got to defend my boy there.
Arjun got fired up, man. I don't have to do I was ready for about the same thing, but you were all fired up on that one. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. Derwin.
No, I just had a quick kind of question about that. So when you talked to my question was Derwin cleared for minicamp? I don't remember if he was medically cleared. He was?
Derwin was cleared from the start.
All right.
So Tranquil, they are training Tranquil to call the plays. And it looks like with the second unit, when Tranquil is there, he is calling the plays. But if Derwin's on the field, he's calling the plays. That's how it's going to be. I'd be interested. Obviously, we're hoping that Derwin stays healthy, but if he misses a game or two, I wonder who would call plays then, because if Tranquil is linebacker 3 and Derwin's off the field, maybe Chris Harris. I guess.
That would be my second choice, honestly, because how much he's playing at safety right now.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one to keep an eye on. A bunch of people asking about the O-line again. It's so hard from an offensive line standpoint to block players without pads. I really hate to be repeating myself, but it is so hard. And Michael Daly asked about Larry Roundtree. The running backs all look the same. I think Justin Jackson has kind of been the standout receiver, but in terms of running game, it's basically non-existent right now because there's no push. There's no way for offensive linemen to really excel in this point. You're really just looking for them to be going the right direction, making sure that their communication is on point.
It's a lot of outside runs.
It is a lot of outside.
That's
more outside than inside, which is good.
Yeah.
Taking advantage of the athleticism.
Yeah.
So RB4 at this point, I think.
Yeah, I've been watching Larry Roundtree with my own 2 eyes the last 4 days. He's been great. Anyway, I'm going to be the company man and say that I made a thumbnail about Madden, so we have to talk about Madden now because we have 12 minutes left before Steven has to check out. So I'm going to be the company man and say that.
Yeah, so let us know if you guys have any specific questions. Other than that, we'll talk about Craig Smith pointed out that Ronaldo Hill did confirm that Derwin James is the play caller. So thank you, Craig. What's up, man? Thanks for tuning in. In terms of the Madden stuff, I guess I can understand from a certain point, rating Justin Herbert, kind of lower-ish, but him being 15th and behind Baker Mayfield is really ridiculous. And You know, they had Baker Mayfield, I think, as the 4th strongest arm in general, which is really ridiculous. I don't know. Alex kind of said this. I don't know who Baker paid to get that high of a ranking, but he is absolutely not the 11th best quarterback in the league and does not have a top 5 arm in the league either.
I think
I was just
that 160-yard Hail Mary throw at the end of that.
Watch more football, Madden, please.
Jeez.
I was just looking at some of those throw power rankings, and it's like, all right, you know, I can see how, you know, Stafford, Mahomes, you got Allen in there, all right, and Rodgers is there, of course, but just Baker, like, and, you know, I got Browns fans in my mentions being like, actually, if you're talking about air yards per throw, he was one of the highest. And I'm like, okay, that's not what we're talking about, though. We're talking about throw power and the guys that you would kind of, you know, trust throwing 60 yards down the field with no problem. Not that Baker Mayfield has a noodle arm per se. He does not.
Yeah, I would
probably put him in like top 10, 11 arm strength. Like, I think he's fine.
Yeah.
But like just the guys that I would put before him, like it would be Justin Herbert. Oh, someone pointed out Zach Wilson had higher throwing power than Justin Herbert.
He was one spot ahead of Herbert. Yeah,
He was
one spot ahead.
Yeah.
I think his rating was like a 94 and Herbert's was a 93.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's very weird.
How's that possible?
I watched Zach Wilson play football for 3 years, and I never felt like he had a super strong arm. Like, he's fine, just like Baker, but, you know, definitely not a super strong arm.
Yeah, it's just like there's so many guys I would put before Wilson or Mayfield. It would be Allen, Mahomes, Herbert, Rodgers. Kyler Murray's not even in the top 10, and I think Kyler Murray kind of has to be there. Like, I don't understand what we're doing there. But yeah, I'd probably put Russell Wilson ahead of Baker Mayfield. But there's probably just like 7 or 8 guys. So that was a really perplexing ranking. And the other really perplexing ranking, in my opinion, was Von Miller and JJ Watt both currently being ahead of Joey Bosa. 3 years ago, I would have said that was the case, but both are coming off of, or Von Miller specifically coming off of a season-ending injury last year. JJ Watt was coming off of a season-ending injury 2 years ago, and you know they both were good in their last full seasons, but you know Von Miller kind of declined in productivity, and so did JJ Watt, and they're both going into their age 33 seasons, which is crazy because that's how quickly time has passed. But you know, with Bosa being 8th is just kind of crazy.
The point Craig brought up is pretty interesting with all the talk about Herbert regression under pressure. They have him mid-80s. Like, you would think it's a 99 how he played last year, right?
Yeah. Like, I don't know enough about Madden. I don't play the game. I haven't played the game since I was in high school.
Yep.
But I don't understand how these rankings are made. Because, I mean, Trevor Lawrence was like 2 spots behind Justin Herbert overall. And Zach Wilson has a stronger arm, apparently. And it's like, these guys haven't even played a game yet. Like, how is this possible? And, you know, I'm glad that Alex mentioned the edge rusher rankings, which were very confusing. The running back rankings were confusing too. They had Marlon Mack rated higher than Jonathan Taylor, who was clearly the better runner on his own team.
Yeah.
So I just don't know how these rankings are made, man. Like, I think it's hard to be like, okay, Devontae Adams isn't like he's the best receiver, right? But then after, like, I feel like the top 2 at each position, it's just like, how is this correlating? Like, who's making these decisions? Who's watching tape? No one, apparently.
Nobody.
So if you still play Madden, like, I don't understand why it's really trash. And Alex used current graphics for the thumbnail, and they look terrible. They look like they're from 2014.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we talked about those ESPN Fowler rankings where he pulled all like the NFL GMs and everything, and like, you know, there were some things we could disagree on in those lists, but like they look just much better than those Madden lists. Like, as a whole, you know, when you talk about the quarterbacks, like, generally speaking, they were how I would rank the top 10 quarterbacks pretty closely. I feel like Madden does kind of 2 things. One, I feel like they tried to hype up the rookies, right? Which is why I think Lawrence and all those guys are really high to start. And I think that they keep players really high for a long time, which is what I kind of think is the case with Von Miller and JJ Watt, which is like, hey, Von Miller is still, you know, a top 4 or 5 edge rusher, despite, you know, having a devastating foot injury, right? So I think that that's just kind of how it kind of works. I don't know why they haven't, you know, changed it up. Someone pointed out in the chat, Keenan Allen talked about, how Madden was trash in his press conference, and like the game like kind of is, they haven't updated the graphics, and still like these ratings are just so confusing. And the bad part about it is I feel like they purposely make the ratings like this so we talk about it and we're talking about it. But like, just make better ratings, and your game will still sell. I'm sure people will still buy it.
Well, like Craig pointed out, he said he wished I could stop playing the game, but football is a hell of a drug. It really is. And James Harris is pointing out Madden has no competition. So
yep, exactly.
That is also true. Who is Ryan Moody? I don't know who that is. Apparently he was talking about us, but
wait, what? Where?
I don't know.
Ryan Moody just uploaded a video talking about you guys quoting Keenan Allen.
Did we quote Keenan Allen?
Well, Keenan Allen yesterday said that Madden was trash, or 2 days ago.
Yeah.
He was like, the game is trash.
Oh, yeah. I think he probably used our quote tweet in the thing.
Rating guys.
Oh.
He could be. I don't know. Like.
Well, then fuck you, Moody. Hope you're listening.
Justin Jefferson is 87. Justin Herbert is 80. Oh, my gosh. Wow. I will say, in like the one thing in terms of Madden rankings that I did kind of understand, they had Derwin James, I think, as like safety 11, and a lot of people were mad. And I get it, like Derwin is a special player, but we have to stop getting mad about Derwin James's rankings because he hasn't played football in
tough.
2 years.
It really is tough,
right?
Like,
so, but that's kind of. I would just say that's kind of the thing for me is like, all right, Derwin has missed, large portions of the last 2 years, specifically last season, right? But how he dropped a point, I think, in the rankings and ended up 11th best safety. But still, you have guys that didn't play last year at all, like Von Miller and Nick Bosa, basically, maintaining their rankings. So, plus Von Miller's like obviously an older player versus, Derwin James is, 25. So I think that's kind of the thing for me where I agree that Derwin probably should drop down the rankings based on not playing the last 2 seasons, but it just doesn't seem to be consistent principle applied to the rest of everybody.
Yeah.
I have to retract my statement about FU Ryan Moody. I was informed initially that he was one of the people that evaluated. Apparently he's just a critic of the game. So you're more than welcome to come on the podcast anytime, Moody. Really support your channel. Go check him out.
Yeah, keep up the good work criticizing Madden and how terrible it is.
We are all
right. All right, guys. Any other takeaways from training camp this week? Tyler's going to be there on Monday for their first padded practice. So excited to hear some takeaways then. But any takeaways from this weekend?
Yeah, I'll end with this. I saw a lot of people talking about Justin Herbert and like how he looked. He hasn't looked bad. Like it hasn't been like eye-openingly bad.
There you go.
But he hasn't looked like amazing either. He hasn't like everyone's talking about dark horse MVP candidate. He's not looking like that. But this is a new offense. It's probably one of the most complex offenses you can learn, and they haven't even opened up the playbook. Like it feels like they're taking one deep shot every time Herbert's in, and it's the last play of the drive, which is fine, right? Like, it's like you just see what you got. But it seems like it's just a lot of play action, which I'm happy about. But then it's also a lot of just like intermediate crossing routes, out routes. But yeah, Herbert hasn't looked the most accurate. I think Tyler talked about like how he's looked like 50-50. It hasn't been like the accuracy issues are still there, but he can, he makes up for it with those 50-yard throws, like one inaccurate throw, 1 50-yard throw.
I was just gonna say, in terms of the like, we've only seen so much of the playbook thing. We did get somebody that commented like, "Oh man, the Chargers are giving away the whole package." It's like, no, they're not. They're showing like 20-25% really of what's going to be there week 1, week 2, week 3. So I think in terms of the actual play call, like, it's interesting to point out Gabe Neighbors is out wide and this is happening, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that we're just seeing such a small chunk of the offense. And that's what we're going to notice when they play Washington and Dallas and then Kansas City.
The only thing I'll say about Herbert is I have to probably change it. Not 50-50. I actually think he's been very good at the routes or with the receivers or tight ends that are supposed to be efficient. So like Jared Cook, Tyron Johnson. Not that Johnson's efficient, but like it works better. He's having trouble, I think, with Williams and Guyton, who are a little bit one-trick ponies, and you can't make that work. So I shouldn't say he's 50-50. I just think there's a certain comfort with some guys, and he's just missing others. And today it was Williams.
I think, like, in terms of Herbert, I think he's been pretty accurate in the intermediate and deep areas, right? And, like, that's what we know that he is. But there was one play specifically that Arjun and I kind of pointed out when it happened. It was kind of like a screen route to KJ Hill, and he really, like, chucked that thing.
Yeah.
Like, he really tried to throw a laser. So I think that's the thing that I want to see more improvement out of Justin Herbert is know when to, take some heat off, and specifically in the short routes, because, I mean, he's got such a strong arm, and it's just, I understand, like, it's hard to make that adjustment, but I just want to see him work on that a little bit more, because I saw a lot of people on Twitter blaming KJ Hill for the drop when really Justin really just needs to take a little bit off of those passes. But I'm not concerned, right? And I'm glad that Alex kind of pointed out the playbook. We all have to remember they didn't have any live action in the spring. It was all mental reps and installing things. So this has been the first week that they are going live and installing these plays against live action. So definitely going to improve, right? Defense always looks amazing in the first week of training camp, and the offense should pick up. They'll add more layers. They'll add more plays. And as they go through camp and get into a preseason game, and then, we have to remember that this new scheme is one that builds throughout the season, and it should be getting better each and every week. And that's really all we can hope for, is that it does get better each and every week.
Yep.
I would also just say, in terms of the Justin Herbert strength thing, I mean, we saw that last year in a couple games where Keenan Allen would run like a screen, and then Herbert would throw it like 180 miles per hour.
Yeah.
And it would just bounce off his chest. There was stuff like that with kind of Kalen Ballage too, a little bit. So yeah, I mean, that's not a new thing. I'm not too concerned about it, but like I said, I think it's just kind of quarterback, coaching technique a little bit, and that'll be one of the interesting things to watch. In addition to new offense and everything, is new quarterbacks coach, right? And the Pep Hamilton is no longer with the team, obviously, and it is Shane Day, right, as the quarterback coach.
Yeah, Shane Day, also very small human being.
Probably taller than me.
He's probably your same height, dude.
I kick his ass. He got a big shirt though, so I don't know what he's packing underneath that.
Oh, I know, he wears the massive shirt. It's so funny. Sorry to cut you off, Alex.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say, we'll see kind of what the difference between those two guys is, and sort of how they coach technique a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so that's going to do it for us today, guys. Thanks for tuning in. We've had a great audience these last few days. I'm really excited about the content that is coming, your way, obviously. Arjun's going to keep crushing it, so check on his channels. Make sure and subscribe to our channel as well. Like all the videos, comment. Yesterday, we had some great interactions on the channel, so keep that up. All those interactions really help us grow the channel. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next time.